Okay, let's get right into it. So uh, the fiscal picture of the city is sort of outlined in this slide. Um, what's interesting is that sales tax revenue and property tax revenue came in much stronger than were projected before the pandemic. And if you recall, the voters passed a measure to increase the sales tax in South Pasadena to help make the city sustainable. So the last year's budget, or the current fiscal year, is around 28 million roughly, and more money has come in than expected. Uh, Plus, there's a cell phone tower lease that's being paid in a lump sum. And then there's money coming in from the American Rescue Plan. And I just heard an NPR report today that this money will begin to be dispersed to cities, according to the Biden administration, tomorrow. Cities could be receiving checks within days, dispersing some of this money. So it looks like in the coming year, maybe around 40 million of revenue compared to 27, 28, 29 million per year in the past. And there's reserve funds. This is money that is held and not spent. Some of it is for projects that have never gone forward. It's been kept for years. And then there's a rainy day fund. But together they total about 23 million. So where we are in the budget process currently is the staff has taken initial comments through the online process of a survey, plus comments emailed in. They're presumably drafting a budget now. It's supposed to go to the Finance Commission before it goes to the City Council for adoption for the coming year. It has to be adopted by June 30. The new fiscal year starts July 1. So I'll just say a word here. I know most probably of all these topics we're going to cover tonight about the environment. And this is an iconic picture that you probably have seen before from the massive fires that burned up north, and the smoke drifted all the way down here. The globe is in a climate crisis. Really, it's not climate change, it's a crisis. People are being displaced by extreme weather events. All sorts of things are happening around the world. South Pasadena has a climate action plan. We have a green action plan. These are good plans. They have measures in them to conserve water, to adapt to a hotter climate, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, move to clean energy, have more pedestrian and bicycle friendly streets. But action to implement this, there are many measures. Each one has to be implemented through an ordinance or through a program, has been stalled primarily due to lack of staff. So, and in fact, in the last Natural Resources and Environmental Commission meeting, it came right out that there's a bottleneck because of the lack of staff, and the staff member, the sole staff member working exclusively on environmental programs, came right out and said they need another person at City Hall to make the kind of progress that people would like to see, I think. Transportation, you know about if you've lived here for any length of time. It's been better during the pandemic, but traffic's coming back. And there is money available from the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, from the from state level, from federal level, and South Pass. Other cities are going ahead with projects to relieve traffic, synchronize signals, calm streets, enhance pedestrian safety, particularly around schools. Money is there for this. It's earmarked for South Pasadena, but we haven't been able to go forward with projects because we don't have staff that can plan these projects and provide the documentation to the funding authorities that's needed for them to disperse money that is supposed to be coming to us. So we're recommending hiring a transportation manager that could get things moving and get the money flowing here so we could see improvements. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ella.
So I always think it's important to lead with the fact that renters make up 53% of the city of South Pasadena. That's a really substantial percentage, and it's one thing I think that makes South Pas a vibrant and cool community to live in. And before the pandemic, a large percentage of South Pasadenans were already facing some housing insecurity. They were already considered rent burdened, which means that you spend over a third of your income on rent. We know that the pandemic has had pretty serious economic consequences for low and middle income people, and especially for parents with young children. A lot of women have taken major hits in our economy as a consequence of the pandemic. So, a lot of our proposals are centered around trying to make sure to support folks to stay in their housing. There's also some data that suggests that the pandemic is going to greatly increase the number of unhoused people in LA County. So we already have about 66,000 unsheltered people living on the street in LA County, and it's expected that it's going to increase by 52,000 people by 2023. So, it's our position that the city really needs to participate in offering some solutions to these problems. There's, a wave of evictions coming as people have to pay rent that they were not paying during the pandemic. And there's a lot that the city can do. So we'd like to see the city offer another round of rental assistance. We were able to pressure the city to offer rental assistance with some money that it got in 2020. It was pretty small. So unfortunately, there was not a lot of take up, but we think that as the rent comes due, this is another opportunity for the city to support people to stay in their housing. There's going to be some state programs that I think are still being finalized. So the city should focus on, where are the gaps in what the state is offering and how can we fill in those gaps. We would like the city to start working with landlords to offer vacant units to Section 8 voucher holders. A big problem and a big driver of homelessness in our county is, a lot of people have vouchers but cannot locate housing that will accept their voucher. And, trying to build those relationships with landlords was actually a goal of the city's back in 2018. And as far as we can tell, no one's done it. So, and again, we think this is the right time. This is a good time. It's going to be really important going forward. We have a contract in South Pasadena with an agency called Housing Rights Center. It's a pretty small contract, and it mostly covers like public education about sort of, here are your rights as a tenant. We would like to see a more robust contract with a legal services provider because, there's a lot of overlap in this group with the South Pasadena Tenants Union. The Tenants Union gets inquiries all the time from tenants who are having problems with their landlord. They're being told verbally, oh, we're going to evict you. They've been getting inadequate or insufficient notices. There's lots of problems. And unfortunately, the options for legal representation can be limited. So we'd like to see more services available to South Pasadena tenants. And then, some good news is that we recently passed in South Pasadena something called an inclusionary housing ordinance, which is a local ordinance which requires developers to include affordable units when they build a new development. And it's a pretty robust requirement. So 20% of new units are supposed to be available for low and very low income tenants. And, really they're trying to sort of make up for the missed opportunities of the last 8 years when only 10 or 11 affordable units have been built in the city. So that's great. Unfortunately, the city sort of says, well, we don't really have any staff to implement it. We don't have any staff to monitor, and make sure that things that landlords and developers are complying with the inclusionary housing ordinance. And, we think that having some resources within the city to ensure compliance with the new ordinance would be really important. So a big recommendation that we've made in our budget is to add some staffing to the to the planning department to allow for more resources around this issue, among other issues that renters face in our city.
Matthew?
Yeah, so as Ella touched on a moment ago, we all know that there is a humanitarian crisis in LA County. 66,000 homeless people and a wave of evictions are coming. Along with a lot of the things that Ella mentioned, we think that there's a great opportunity for South Pasadena to show real leadership and compassion and create a homeless and housing resource center. It would be a permanent, safe, and welcoming location somewhere in a South Pasadena city-owned property. And it would have the goal of preventing further homelessness for people on the edge of eviction. It would provide basic human services for people who are living without shelter. There's a number of locations we've already identified as good possibilities, but we leave it to the city to kind of work with them and figure out what's the best place. And what would happen here is it would be a resource for housing insecure people to come and find out about a bunch of the things that Ella talked about. And there'd be information and aid and advice on housing issues. And basically it would be a place where we could prevent people from entering into unhoused situation. The other thing that we would do there is we would use it as a resource for unhoused neighbors to receive social services and housing aid. What we mean by that is just to provide basic needs such as showers, laundry, charging station, and internet, some basic everyday things that are currently available in sort of a scatter shot or not available at all to our local unhoused population, which for those who don't know, the estimate is that we have at any given time about 15 unhoused people, but the population kind of varies throughout the year. But that's the general number of people. But besides the basic needs, it would also serve as a hub for social services and housing assistance to hopefully ultimately get those people the help that they need to get them off the street. And it could also be used as a staging area for volunteer activities like food distribution, clothing distribution. We think that the city would need to staff this location, but they would partner with outside organizations like Housing Rights Center that would help people who are on the verge of eviction avoid eviction, and also with Union Station Homeless Services, for instance. It doesn't necessarily have to be those organizations, but someone like them. And we think that by establishing a permanent and a reliable center, we can maximize the effectiveness of the organizations to come in and help people who are our most vulnerable neighbors. And I think if we demonstrate a commitment to those in need and a benefit for continuity of services being offered, it would be the most effective way to help these people that are suffering these issues. And also it would show South Pasadena to be progressive and committed and compassionate. And lastly, it's partly modeled on an existing homeless resource hub that Arcadia runs several days a week. That's run quite successfully and it provides access to all the stuff that we just discussed here. So that's what we hope for.
Helen.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So for people who are new to CAREFIRST, this is really the crux of our mission. We came together last summer following the murder of George Floyd to really think about how we can reimagine public safety in South Pasadena. And so much of it is about where we choose to dedicate our resources in our city, meaning money. Last year, we really focused on, or we tried to ask the city for a good faith 10% cut across the board in the police department. And the reason why is because the police department is so big in our city. It occupies about a third of our city budget, coming in at around $10 million in the last fiscal year. That's a lot for a city our size. There are currently 51 personnel or employees of the police department, and of that, 36 are sworn officers. But last year, I don't think any city council member really took our proposal seriously, and they have made lots of public comment about their unwavering support for the police department. So just to be clear, CAREFIRST is not anti-police, but we really have a different view of public safety in our community. So that said, what we're proposing this year is what we think is a very modest approach to police reform in our city, which is just to freeze the police department budget, to have no growth in the next coming years, and to think about attrition, and instead of laying off officers or cutting anyone's jobs, just to think about people who are naturally leaving or retiring and letting the department shrink that way, and then in turn reallocating those funds to different programs in the future. So we have the benefit of this year of having a surplus, which we want to fund all the different areas that we're going over tonight. But in terms of the police department, that's one area that we don't want any new staff and no increases in funding. Currently, there are 2 vacant positions in the police department. And because each position salary can range anywhere from low 70s to over 100,000 plus pension and benefits, we're estimating that around $250,000 could be allocated to an alternative in policing, which is a crisis response to mental wellness checks in our city, for people, for there to be a crisis response team to people who are unhoused. At the moment, the police is in charge of homeless outreach in our city. They're also in charge of mental health wellness checks. So this includes anyone that a neighbor would call the police for to see if someone's not well. It could be seniors, it could be people as young as high school students. And what we saw about 3 years ago was that the police pulled up to Vanessa Marquez's apartment for a wellness check, but ended up shooting her. And she died because there were so many rounds of ammunition fired at her. And we want to avoid that. And there is a different model that's available. And it's popularly known as Cahoots. It's a model that comes out of Eugene, Oregon. And it's a model that's being explored by many cities, including like Los Angeles, cities throughout the country. One of the people who's really big in implementing in Oregon lives in Pasadena, and so he gave us a presentation in South Pasadena not too long ago. And he said basically for any city to roll out a mobile crisis team of 1 van, we will need about 100,000 residents. South Pasadena currently has around 26,000, so we think we can partner with neighboring cities like Alhambra or maybe a couple other smaller ones, and really come up with their own crisis response team. Regionally in the San Gabriel Valley, this is like currently being explored, but it's still going through consultants and stakeholder engagement processes, which we think will just take a really long time. So given the city's surplus, especially within the police department, we're asking the city to reallocate that money to just immediately start the mobile crisis response team in our city and get that rolling. So next slide. I think there's one more. Yeah. So a big part of our work in CAREFIRST is also to think about racial equity. I do want to welcome Farron, who joined us not too long ago. So hi, Farron, welcome. Farron is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter here in South Pasadena, and she contributed a lot to this budget proposal. Currently, as many of you may know, the city is thinking about ways to redress its past as a sundown town, meaning that at one point in the city for many decades, particularly in the 40s and 70s, it purposefully excluded Black people from living here in the city and from staying here in the city after sundown. That's where the sundown town comes from. And we really think that one way the city can redress this is by doing things that will really bridge the Black and white wealth gap that exists here in our city, in the greater LA area, and throughout the country. We want the city to have more proactive efforts to bring Black-owned businesses into the city. And if you read a report, which is online, we outline several ways that the city can do this, including using some of the federal grant money that's coming through. We also want to propose to the city to start a guaranteed income program. This has been pretty popular in different cities now, and it really started with Mayor Michael Tubbs in Stockton. Just want to take a quick look at my notes. So we want this to be piloted in South Pasadena. It could be funded partially from city tax dollars, or the city can make commitments to match private donations, or try to get some government grant funding. But initially what will happen is the city will have to study it to see its impact on residents. So for in Stockton, starting in 2019, the city gave $520 a month to 125 residents. And then it committed to doing some academic and empirical studies on the outcomes for people. Mayor Garcetti has proposed something similar in the city of LA, and his recently is $1,000 a month for 2,000 families for a year. Compton has $300 to $600 a month for a maximum of about 800 people. So given the city's surplus and really deep desire for the residents of the city to have more racial equity, we think South Pasadena should also join many of the cities throughout the country in starting a guaranteed income program here. But in this first year, it really just to study it and see how it goes.
Thank you, Helen. John, why don't you talk about youth services?
Yeah, hi. So in youth services, this is actually something that came from a group of young people in the city. We met with 3 students at South Pass High, very engaged young people, and sometimes involved in city affairs. So they were super helpful, and they really took the bull by the horns. And they not only met with us, but they went out and they polled a number of their peers, and they got about 25 responses. And from those, we kind of, surmised which were the most popular ideas that they had for youth services. And they also had some other things in their poll, and just as kind of an interesting fact, they asked kids what are your priorities for if the city were to spend resources in various areas. And the top 3 were number 1, mental health, number 2, affordable housing, and number 3, environment. And we're going to go through some of the ideas that we pulled from this outreach. So number 1 is, and we really love this idea, make preschool and childcare available and affordable. So if you earn less than 400% of the federal poverty level, you would be eligible for that. Wraparound care for kindergarten kids who go a half day. Obviously, that allows the parents to work a full day without having to cut loose early. And Camp Med I'm not familiar with Camp Med, but we would like to see more locations. Can someone tell me what are they offering childcare at Camp Med?
Yeah, it's through the city, and it tends to be pretty affordable relative to some of the other options.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so it's just expanding that program.
Okay, great. And then also employment program, paid internships. So, we kind of like to think of our city as relatively affluent, and there's a lot of truth to that. But we also, we have a lot of kids who qualify for the free or reduced price lunch program. And I believe that's the one that generates the 22% number there. And, not everybody is going off to fancy colleges. 35% either go to community college or no college. So this would be something that would, help kids transition into the workforce. Other cities are doing it as well. Next slide, please. And I really love this one. Allow young people 16 years of age and older, allow them to vote for city elected offices and school board openings. And so we're suggesting that they could spend some money and study this and come back and report how this might play out. Enhanced mental health services. So this is something we've heard quite a bit. You know, we don't have enough of these services in the schools. So, you know, we would even go so far as to recommend, you know, off-campus resources, community-based therapists, social workers, mental health hotline, seminars, library materials, and outdoor activities to enrich mental health. Next slide, please. Grant program for community projects. So this is something I wish they had for big kids like me. So, you know, we have a lot of, I think we're fortunate. It seems we have a lot of very engaged young people. I don't remember seeing this level of enthusiasm when I was their age, but these kids really get out there, and then, you know, you look at social media, and there's a lot of commentary about very, very large issues and serious issues. So these are kids who want to be involved, and they've told us as much. So some of these are, and again, these are their ideas. The garage sale in the vacant lot there on Fremont and Mission. A composting program. And this is really cool. It could, the proceeds, if we can call them that, of the composting go into the community garden, or, you know, I'm sure lots of local residents would be able to make good use of that material as well. Mutual aid, definitely could use some money for that. We had a lot of kids come out and help us when we did the Thanksgiving and Christmas meals for our unhoused friends in the Arroyo area. So we saw a lot of participation there, and that's something they care about. So is there another slide on youth services, Bill?
Now we're back to pie.
Back to pie. All right. So who's got something here? Who would like to go first? What is your pie in the sky idea? You might be the winner by default if you just speak up.
Well, this isn't really a pie in the sky idea, but something that was mentioned at your last webinar was having an audit of the police department. That's something that ARC really wants to push for, just to see, like, you know, where is money going? How is it being spent? And like other issues as well, like, are there extremists in the police department? Just like a general, you know, evaluation, because now we have a new police chief, like now would be the time to have like an outside audit. So that's just something that we've been talking about.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. The audit is definitely on our list, and you know, it didn't, it's not included in our report, but I think it's something that's still a priority for CareFirst, because, you know, it is so important to have some transparency if you want to make any changes. So yeah, thanks for raising that.
No doubt.
Well, we'd love to, you know, work with y'all on that issue.
That would be great.
Definitely one of those things that shouldn't be as pie in the sky as it is, given the climate here in town around policing. So yes, thanks for that. How about somebody else? We would love to hear your ideas.
Or just responses or questions. We can just have a discussion, and then maybe we'll figure out a way to.
Yeah, I'm going to advance the slides real quickly and just say that these are people who contributed to our proposals on the upcoming budget. They represent people with different backgrounds and interests and expertise. So just wanted to share that. And then I think I'm going to stop the screen sharing, and we can just have a conversation.
Hi, this is Wendy. I just wanted to first thank you all for all the work that you put into this. It's incredible. And when I thought of pie in the sky, I don't feel like this is really in the sky, but like as we kind of talk about youth programming or support for youth and like after school care, one thing that I notice being a single parent of an elementary school student is the summers are really difficult to kind of piecemeal like the plan together. And so just kind of thinking creatively about like having scholarships or maybe like funding SPEF a bit more so that more families could afford not only summer school, but the kind of after school programs that are run in conjunction with the summer school. And from what I understand, that's partly SPEF's doing, and it's partly like the district's purview of that, as well as they have, as you probably know, they have camps. SPEF does camps throughout the whole summer after summer school ends. Yeah, but it's kind of tough for working parents to kind of figure out the summer, and it's often way more expensive than the school year for childcare. So just kind of throwing that out there.
Well, that's a good point, and perhaps something that could be emphasized, by an expanded program and making it more economical. Who else?
This is Laboni. I just also wanted to thank you guys for all the hard, like amazing work, not just hard work, but just thoughtful work that you did to pull all this information together. Just going through those budgets must have been mind numbing, but to pull out, actual FTEs that are kind of, unspoken for is pretty amazing. But I feel like one kind of overarching thing I've been hearing is that there's just not a lot of professional staff at the city level who can take on any of these projects, and I think, it's obviously one thing as lay people to identify the stuff, but just really, have somebody who's in the city who's overseeing this stuff better, and not knowing what the city's current structure is. It seems like it's a long-term project, any one of these things, but certainly collectively, to have not just elected, but like hired staff in the city who has the qualifications to see some of these things through is essential. So, not having worked with city budgets, I don't know how you get there, but certainly it seems like that's something that if we can propose concretely would hopefully go a long way towards making sure that, whatever of these ideas that kind of get traction with the city actually, kind of work and have outcomes down the line.
Well, thank you. Let me just give a couple examples in the environmental area. The city collects what's called a water efficiency fee as part of the water bill, and it's supposed to be used to increase water efficiency in the city, such as reducing sprinkler use, changing landscaping, all of those types of things. There's about $1 million in that fund. It's supposed to be money returned to the community to increase water efficiency and keep water bills for everyone down. But the city hasn't promoted it. They haven't really been creative about how that money could be used. We pay more property tax now due to Measure W, which was passed in LA County to try to capture stormwater and enhance our water supply. There's supposed to be rebates that you get for removing impermeable surfaces, replacing them with permeable surfaces. That money should be available to residents here that want to do this, and they can then reduce their property tax bill by doing this, the increment that they pay, for Measure W. That hasn't been made available or promoted by our city due to lack of staff. And the list just goes on and on and on. We have reserve funds that are dedicated to specific projects. Those have not been brought into reality. Some of that money has been sitting in reserves for as much as 10 years, and it's money that should be serving the taxpayers, the residents here. It's not money that should just be sitting in an investment account that the city manages, because we've paid that for services and goods, public goods.
So, Greg, yeah, do you guys have thoughts on how to force the city to actually, move those projects forward? It seems like maybe not so much a budget issue, but really getting the city council to do their job, like making sure we have, like I said, qualified people to, move these things forward.
Well, it is a staffing issue. I believe that the staff is busy and overworked. I mean, you look at the planning department, and that's one overworked department. And that's why it's taken so long, I think, for instance, to get a inclusionary housing ordinance, is because there just isn't the staff. So they need to bring some people on. And even there's some one-time money here. Most of it is one-time. But the property tax and the sales tax are coming in better. And, the pandemic didn't really dent the proceeds to the city. It increased them, or they increased during the pandemic. And so, the city council needs some pressure from us, from all of you on this call, I think, to kind of up the ante and not be as conservative and squirrel all this money away in reserves. I mean, we need staff. The streets are dangerous in many intersections around here. You can put a motorcycle policeman, around the corner to stop people that aren't stopping at traffic signs and so forth, but they're not going to be there 24/7, 365. You need engineered traffic controls to do a better job, and the money's there for it, but we don't have anyone that can put together an application that can get the money dispersed to us. We're talking about 4 new staff members at City Hall: housing, transportation, environment, and some other programs they could do with consultants or part-time people. And that's not that much money. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we've got an additional at least $1 million of continual revenue, not one-time money, that's coming into the coffers from paying increased sales tax that the voters here voted for. It's our point of view that it's time to deliver. It's time to deliver the goods that we've paid for. So help us with it.
Yeah, pressure does work. I think there are probably a few on this call who are recipients of our calls for comments to council. And lately, we've actually gotten a few things done via those very well signed public comments. I think it's interesting with the CAHOOTS, the crisis response piece. Diana Mahmood was quick to tell us a few months ago how she was, she had been to the Council of Governments and she heard the presentation and she liked the idea. And, but the more we talk about this model and push this model, the more it gets into the conversation, it seems, the more she's very quick to say, you know what, we can't do this on our own. We need to make this a regional initiative. So, the closer you get, the sometimes the farther you get. I think it helps to have a champion. We need somebody who's willing to, in this case, to reach out to those other cities, right, and get the ball rolling and really see, all right, well, how are we gonna do this? Get on board, So we're hoping for that. I don't think it's going to be Diana, but this idea is picking up steam, and Ann just sent us an article from Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is launching a crisis response team, CAHOOT style. So yeah, let's keep up the pressure. It's been known to work around here. I guess that's the upside, right?
Did you all listen in on the new the city manager, that kind of public interview that we got to listen? How do you all feel about the new city manager coming on? Anybody like her?
I was unable to be part of that, but I know we had at least one or two people maybe who were there, and I don't know if anyone would like to express.
Well, I mean, she seemed, you know, progressive, enthusiastic. She's local, so she's not like from real far away. You know, she went to school in Pasadena, and then she was, you know, just in assistant manager in San Gabriel. So she, you know, and she's new, and so sometimes having a new, fresh person, if you can get to them early on, it might help. And then also, I think you've got some very good professional staff, like in community services, Sheila Pouch, who I think is very receptive to a lot of what we're all talking about tonight. I mean, her budget was decimated, and I think you know, and a lot of this could fall under some of the community services, and I think she's a really good ally to have. Yeah, and I just think, you know, building bridge, you know, keep building the bridges that you've got already in the city might help to get the cause out. You know, find who you've got that you can work with, and I think Joanne Hankemer in planning, she's like that's the best planner we've had in a long time, and I think she would be very receptive. But I agree with you, Bill, and everybody else who said, I think we're very low on professional staff in this city. I mean, look what happened with our finance department. That's why we got into such crazy times with the audits. We had so many people leave and all that historical knowledge left, and we're down to what, 5 people that are doing everything in the finance department. So yeah, I think that's a real issue, is the professional staff in the city.
Well, thank you, Bianca.
Yeah, I think there's a real status quo bias in favor of, you know, the staff that we have are really busy doing all the things that they would ordinarily do. So anytime you want to build out something new, that's always the first response. Well, we don't have any staff. Well, we don't have any capacity. We can't do that. You know, so there's only so much as advocates that we can do where we say, well, you don't have to do anything. Don't worry. You know, there's some other agency that's going to do all the heavy lifting, all the enforcement. You know, at some point you do need capacity within the city to really innovate and build and continue to be a vibrant place that is attractive to people to move to. I mean, that's, you know, it's in the city's best interest. Like if you think about some of the things that Bill touched on, so you're paying some staff, but they can then use their skill and expertise to draw in so much more money to the city for all of these projects. I mean, it's an investment. So yeah, it really doesn't feel like pie in the sky when you're just talking about hiring some you know, some planners and some folks who are going to work at City Hall, but that does feel like a really important part of making all of this possible. So I think at this point we're coming up on an hour, and we'd be really interested in hearing from you all, like, you know, would you be interested and willing in participating in sort of next steps, such as, you know, meeting with our finance director to talk about, you know, here's what our proposals look like, and, you know, how can we get there? Since I don't know, there's probably some other, you know, work we can do to sort of advocate this set of policies, and we'd love to hear from you all what ideas you have.
Do we have a finance director in the city?
Not director, the
Acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even have a finance manager.
Acting.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, you know, what we'll do is it's coming up on 8:30, and I know everyone, you know, has obligations probably tonight beyond this. So we will continue to communicate with you, and we will be filing comments with the Finance Commission, with the City Council. We'd like to do something where we get a lot of people on board to join us, the type of things that Ella and Helen have been doing very successfully with housing in South Pasadena, and John and others here on this call. You know, I think we just have to keep the pressure up. You can write letters to the paper. You can, you know, talk directly to your city council members in your district, or any of them really, to staff. You know, you can share this information with other people in the community. And, you know, I'd like to see a bigger community forum that the city might organize, or some other group, maybe with a bigger network that could get more people, where we could have a real discussion and hear from different people in the community, not just always the city, you know, presenting its proposals, but not a real dialogue. So we hope to, you know, stimulate some of these things in the coming weeks. We don't have a lot of time on this, and get as much of this in the budget as possible, and try to really, you know, turn the corner here and start to improve the services and the equity and the inclusiveness of this city at all levels. With that, unless there's further comment, I mean, if anyone wants to add, I'm happy to stay for longer, but unless others want to comment, I think that's about all I've got at this time. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to working with you on these things and making some real progress. Okay, good night, everyone.